If you're going to become a franchisee, are you ready to follow guidelines? Are you ready to stay in a box? Are you ready to, mimic what's already been created? Or do you have the mindset and the personality of, no, I'm going to go create my own thing, my own recipes? If so, don't be a franchisee. You have to protect your brand, but you also have to figure out a way to grow your brand. And the only way to do that is to nurture it.
Why do we do this way? We don't just say, hey, this is how we do it, no exception. We say, hey, this is why we do it. If you see that it's not fit now in the current environment, let's change it. Ultimately, at the end of the day, if they're making more money, again, they're not gonna close the location down and they're not gonna give you hell. So I guess the way you treat the guest of the restaurant, for the franchisors, the guest has to be the franchisee.
100%.
So today's topic is going to revolve around the relationship between franchisee and franchisor. So there's a lot of intricacies involved. I've seen bad, I've seen ugly, and I've seen some really good ones. But what we're going to drill down in, how do you manage that relationship between a franchisor, sometimes saying you have to do this, mandating things. How do you navigate those waters? So Kendall, welcome to the pod. So let's drill down, because I've seen some bad stories around that, and franchisees are saying, here's what I'm gonna do. It's like, no, you can't. And it's like, next thing you know, it's done.
Right.
How do you set the rules? How do you enforce the rules? And when things go south, how do you deal with that?
This could probably be a 5-hour video. First, it starts with franchisee selection. Who are you letting into your franchise brand? If they are somebody who is a big-time entrepreneur, founded a whole bunch of concepts, they come off as, hey, I do things my way, you might want to reconsider that.
Yeah.
Because once they get into your concept, they're going to go against the sole purpose of having a franchise, which is to be able to buy in and leverage an existing system that has their process and standards of how to do business. That's usually a red flag for me. If someone's coming in saying, oh, we wouldn't use that, or no, I would do it that way, stay away from that. Because that's where the drama starts. If you let that into your system, it only gets worse over time. The second thing is you need to educate franchisees on what a franchise relationship is and how it interacts. You have to identify that role with them, because not every franchisee is a former franchisee. They may not understand the role. But I would start by educating them. And we have a prior podcast from about a year ago we did on the different fees and how to leverage those. But do they understand what the fees actually get them? Right? Do they understand that a royalty fee does not get them access to do whatever they want, or to change the concept, or to get the support they ask for? The royalty fee simply gives them the right to do business with our logo on the building. Yeah. And that's it. So that's why you pay that every single month. But when you educate a franchisee and you align on that common ground, it's a lot easier to hold them accountable, because you've set that stage from day one. Hey, just so we're on the same page, and it's respectful. It's not being rude by any means. It's just aligning that this is what this fee does. Here's your FDD, here's your franchise agreement, here's your operations manual, and going through all the inner workings of that, you set the stage. From there, when someone's slipping or falling behind or tries to change their POS system, it's such an easier conversation to hold them accountable to what the guidelines are and have that discussion. But if they're not aware of that, and they're under that misconception of what their fees are for, it creates conflict. And that's why a lot of legacy brands especially have conflict between franchisor and franchisee, and there's battles there, or there's subcommittees that are formed, or associations that are formed by franchisees to take down or go after a franchisor.
Yeah.
And it's just because things went on for too long and were never resolved, and you didn't align on that common ground of why you are getting into the franchise to begin with.
Actually, that brings up a good point, because even if I go out there and try to franchise, these FDD documents, I didn't know, but thanks to you, I've learned a lot of things there. So it could be 150 pages.
Or 300.
I'm not reading it, I'm just signing it.
And that's why we should educate
and
help them understand it, and put all cards on the table.
Yeah.
Sure, a franchisee could say they read it, they didn't, they get in, and then you surprise them with all the stuff that they should have saw. But give them the synopsis of your FDD. What are some key points? What are some key takeaways?
Yeah.
What are some things to watch out for?
Yeah.
Right? Hey, by the way, if you don't pass this third-party audit, you have to pay $500 for your second inspection.
Yeah.
Let them know the catch points.
Sure.
To one, make sure they understand what to be paying attention to.
Yeah.
But that way they're not shocked when it actually happens.
Well, you want the franchisees to help you, right? And by representing you in the manner that you're expecting them to do that, they're helping you. But again, who's gonna read through 300 pages and assume they haven't read it?
Right. And this is why
get them into training.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The training, the quizzes, the testing, proof of knowledge, like get some sort of confirmation that you know where this person stands from a knowledge-based standpoint, right? That way you know you're aligned. But when it comes to it, the accountability side, it is tough because you have a lot of legal rights as a franchisor, but there's also some areas you can't touch as a franchisor.
Sure.
So like I could have a franchisee not paying his employees every single pay cycle, and I technically can't do anything about that.
Sure.
Right? Unless it got to a legal point where then I can jump in at the right time. But if a person keeps curing, even though it's causing damage, you got to leverage your influence. You have to connect with that franchisee and just help them realize what they're doing is not a good look for them or for the brand, and that they got to change their ways. But you never want to lead with the stick. You don't want to lead with the legal and, hey, don't forget I could terminate your franchise agreement. You don't want to ever do that unless it's getting really bad.
Yeah.
You want to lead with the why behind it, with the carrot, so to speak. You want to make sure they understand, hey, here's the impact that it has on your brand, on your guests, on your team. Don't forget that this is, what we trained on in this area. But sometimes they just need reminders. They need to be guided to the right path. But it can be a very challenging relationship if you're not aligned, you don't have that foundation, and you don't hold them accountable. Especially if you wait for too long to hold them accountable, they might have already started changing things about your brand that you weren't aware of, and now you're going to come back a year or two later and try to push them backwards. Now you're the one damaging the guests because you've allowed a company or a brand to start doing things differently in a market, and that now who's right, who's wrong?
Yeah, well, funny because I just read this article that this company put in their terms of condition. It's like, hey, if you read this and come send an email to this email address, you win $1,000. And after like a decade, somebody actually redeemed it.
They did it, yeah.
And it's like, hey, I read that and it said this. But the point is, like, if you find a good culture fit from the franchise, like even employees, like, we just let go of somebody. A person came from a, big corporate infrastructure. It's like, that's not us. It doesn't fit. You want to do this, you want to do that. It's just not the right fit, right?
The only way the relationship works is when people understand their roles.
Yeah.
They understand what I'm supposed to do versus what you're supposed to do. The franchisor is supposed to enable, and the franchisee is supposed to execute.
Yeah.
It's that simple.
Okay, yeah, actually that's a great point.
As a franchisor, I'm supposed to enable your success. I'm not saying you're going to be successful,
yeah.
But you are going to have the tools, the resources, and everything you need to be successful. Now you got to take those and go execute them. Bring them to life within your four walls and focus on the day-to-day. So the franchisor is enabling, the franchisee is executing. You align there. And then you understand that you have to be transparent with the franchisees.
Sure.
The number one complaint you'll get in franchise brands is you're not transparent and you don't collaborate enough with me.
Sure.
So how do you become more transparent, right? What can you share with them? What should you share with them?
Sure.
And then how do you include them in the conversation?
Yeah.
Right? Like something I do in every brand I've ever been involved in is I'll go on road shows and I'll meet with any franchisee who's willing to come meet with me in whatever market I'm in. Some brands I've had to do 30 stops. Some brands it only takes 4. Some brands it only takes 1 because everyone's so engaged, they're well off financially, so they'll travel to you. But either way, go out there and get in front of as many of your franchisees as you possibly can and just ask them questions. Listen. Most of my success has come from listening to franchisees, taking it in, and figuring out what to do with that insight.
Well, and that goes back to, like, I'm a strong believer in that. And that is my number one fear is how do I, because they're on the ground floor, right?
Right.
They're
closest
on the
to the action.
Yeah, they're
right?
on the day-to-day operation, right? I don't want to make a decision and force everybody to do something and it's like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Like, this is not how we do things. So like, even internally, we're trying to figure that out. Is how do we make a decision that the person closest to the customer doesn't look at it and say like, who made that decision, right? So that's a very tricky area, but also like, and then you get agreed back to the point of like, you don't want to use the stick. Like it's, everybody wants to like, they have a reason why they're trying to do it that way.
Right.
You have a reason. And I think even for us, again, this resonates with us because we're always now explaining why. Why do we do this way? We don't just say, hey, this is how we do it, no exception. We say, hey, this is why we do it. And then these are the mistakes that we made that force us to put this SOP in place.
Yeah.
If you see that it's not fit now in the
Right.
current environment,
Right.
let's change it, right?
And that's why a franchisee or a franchisor both have to ask themselves, is this something I want to sign up for?
Yeah.
You have some leaders who may have led a corporate brand or a brand of their own where they had full control. They could do whatever they wanted to do, tell you what to do, you got to do it or you're terminated, right?
And actually, there are brands out there.
Right. Or you have the franchise landscape where you have to be really good at influence and you have to be very patient with execution. Understanding that just because you launch a new product doesn't mean that all 100 locations are launching that product on the launch day, right? It's influence and it's structure and holding people accountable. So if you're getting involved, like depending upon our audience today, if you're going to become a franchisee, are you ready to follow guidelines?
Yeah, exactly.
Are you ready to stay in a box to a degree? Are you ready to, mimic what's already been created?
Yeah.
Or do you have the mindset and the personality of, no, I want to go create my own thing, my own recipes? If so, don't be a franchisee.
Yeah.
On the flip side, franchisors, if you're joining in a leadership capacity or support office role, if you are used to having control and you like to just to tell people what to do and when, don't be in franchising.
Yeah.
Be in corporate operations, right?
Yeah.
If you are going to be in it, you have to focus on your influence. You have to take your time explaining and re-explaining and probably repeating yourself a ton to get to that same end result. But that's the power of franchising. You can leverage the best of all these worlds, and there's so much talent and expertise that come with franchisees, and the same with franchisors. And if you can align and be in partnership and actually be transparent with them, show them the path to success, then you can win.
Yeah.
But if you focus on all the negatives and the conflict and the lack of communication, it tears a franchise down.
Yeah, and there's a good fit for everybody. You
Right.
just got to figure out both sides. Which
Right.
one do you fit in? Because I know a brand that has 130 units, and they say, you want a new franchise? Great, here's a recipe, see you later. Like literally that. And I'm like, how did you guys? And the problem now is every market you go to, it's so inconsistent.
Different.
But they're okay with that. They've been around forever, right?
Some franchisors are just collecting a check.
Yeah,
right?
they're just,
And it's not sustainable over time. Eventually that brand will go away and or have a lot of legal concerns or something.
Sure.
But I think people forget why they got into franchising to begin with. Again, whether it's franchisee side, franchisor side, they just forgot.
Yeah.
And so that leads to more and more conflict. But I have walked into brands where it was a toxic culture.
Yeah.
Franchisees hated us. We're getting cussed out. And in a matter of a year, just by having face-to-face interactions, listening, following up with, from their ideas, what I am going to do and why, what I'm not going to do and why, and then what am I going to put in the parking lot that we'll come back to at a later date.
Yeah.
And then the only caveat to all that is a good idea for a regional position.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Not for system-wide. But either
That's
way,
right.
the communication is strong, and that builds that relationship, that builds transparency, it builds the collaboration, and next thing you know, the people that were cussing me out a year ago are now some of my closest friends to this day.
Sure.
And help me turn that brand around.
Yeah.
And so it just all comes down to realizing that everybody has something to offer, and it's not us versus you. It is a partnership. It's literally, by definition of a franchise agreement, it's a partnership.
It's a partnership, yeah. No, I agree. And actually, again, I think if it's like a team. It's like, hey, you're this team, you're this player, you're there, and we're all trying to accomplish the same thing. How do we do that? And how do we navigate this together? And I think the biggest thing is communication. Like, even I'm trying to get much better internally with our organization is how do we communicate better? How do we not let a miscommunication turn into an ugly situation? And actually, we work with a brand, and corporate mandated a POS system, and the franchisee was like, hey, we're changing. Like, oh, you can't. It's in a franchise agreement, you can't change. Like, okay, great. Next thing you know, he walks in like a few weeks later and the POS has changed. And it's like, are you kidding me? Like,
it goes back to who did you let in the system?
Yeah.
And are they the right culture fit for you? And do you have clear-cut standards and a track record of accountability?
Yeah.
The hardest thing to do is walk into a brand where they've never held a franchisee accountable, never had a default letter, even a warning letter at that, never terminated a franchise agreement. When you walk in and start doing those things, it's going to be tons of pushback.
Yeah.
And it's going to be challenging and very rocky. That's why if you just start from day one, and hey, by the way, franchisee, I saw that you failed your last third-party audit of your restaurant. Just as a reminder, the standard was if you failed one, the second one's at your expense. So let's partner up, let's work together, let's get in your restaurant. I'm going to help tidy things up with you and coach your staff, right? And coach you. And then let's see how you do on your second one, right? But if they understand that, then there's no surprise. Versus you fail 7 of those audits and out of nowhere I come at you hard with a default letter or a threat to close you down. That's not a partnership. And so it's working people up to that. But early in my franchising career, I used to stay away from the word compliance just because I thought it was a nasty word if you're talking to a business owner who's probably invested more cash in the business than you ever will. And so how am I going to say, hey, I have to hold you accountable to my compliance standards? My point of view's changed on that because I saw how that buddy-buddy partnership approach led to so many mistakes, so many pitfalls. And so now, no matter what, I don't care who you are, how long you've been in the business, if you're not doing it right, first you get a warning letter, right? Then you're getting a default with a cure period. If you don't cure, you're getting another default, and then I'm probably going to close you down and I'll take it over corporately because it's not worth the brand damage that exists over time by having somebody who's going against your brand intentionally, regardless of your warnings, regardless of your conversations. And so you have to protect your brand, but you also have to figure out a way to grow your brand. And the only way to do that is to nurture it and focus on that.
And that's a very fine line to run. And you know, I've been in that position where I had a best friend work for me and had to let them go. Actually, it has happened twice. And I had my little brother for a while working for me, and he would show up at 9, leave at 3, and it's like, what are you doing here? Like, this is like, it's like,
it's tough.
What's wrong with that, you know?
But the accountability will be appreciated by that person, whether it's franchisee, team member, you name it. They will feel appreciated over time because they're going to get better and the partnership will get stronger.
Sure.
But you got to hold them accountable to your standards and catch it in the front end. Most people always try to test you in the beginning. Once they realize you're not playing around, then they get on board and you live happily ever after.
And again, it's partnership. Hey, there is a reason I'm doing this. We got to hit our goals. We got to hit this thing. Like, you put a ton of money into this. I don't want to see that go away. Like, it'd be really unfortunate if I can stop it, but it'd be really unfortunate if I don't and let you continue doing this. And then now you failed the third party audit, the kitchen is like termites, whatever, you got rats running around, and then it's like, hey, we could have prevented that 6 months ago, but we didn't. Now here's the situation.
And I'll say this, when people ask me why one franchisee in the same brand is more than the other, anytime I actually put thought into the answer and evaluated the reasons why, it always came back to the successful one follows the systems, the standards, and the overall brand essence that we have built.
Sure.
The group over here that's not are the ones who are, cutting recipes. They're not following the guides. They're not putting people through training. They're paying the minimum wage possible from like a management salary standpoint just to get by. And they just don't follow the playbook. Those who follow the playbook typically win. Those who don't typically fail. It's that simple. But most of the time people have to go through an entire 3 to 5 year period and then shutting down a restaurant to realize, man, I should have just followed the franchise versus trying to turn it into Kendall's version of that franchise.
Yeah, and actually that's a very good point because it's unfortunate because the downside is catastrophic. You're gonna have to close down. You're gonna get negative reviews, and like in the restaurant space, it's really tough. In a space where if I go in there 3 times, then it's 3 different tastes or service is 3 different ways. Once it's really good, once it's really bad. Yeah, the alternative is pretty tough. And it goes back to like planning. Like, I think, again, going back to Simon Sinek, it's like a ship that leaves the dock. It's not just gonna be like, all right, I'm gonna go from New York to London. I'll make it there sometime, somehow, no planning, right? Versus the guy that just plans it all out and it's like, okay, this is the route we're gonna go. Here are the checkpoints. We're gonna ensure at this stage we're here. We're gonna make sure GPS says we're there, etc. I mean, who's gonna get there, right?
Right. And then on the franchisor side, when people ask me, hey, why is one franchisor better than the other? The ones that typically win are the ones who are focusing on franchisee profitability. That's the key. Sometimes a franchisor focuses on the franchise fees they're collecting, the royalties they're collecting, how many units can I get done to make more money. but that's usually the short-term franchises that don't get past a certain point, or they start to retract and go backwards.
Yeah.
But if you focus on the franchisee's profitability and you treat every restaurant as an individual performance metric, right? Not just as a brand, like how much revenue we're doing, it's how are they performing, and is their bottom line going from single-digit profitability to double-digit, right? And always measuring that. That's when you win, because once again, you just proved to your franchisees that it is a partnership and you are caring about their business just as much as they are.
Yeah.
And you know that all your decisions, all your actions have an impact on that bottom line.
Yeah, because if the restaurant is profitable, why would you shut it down?
Exactly.
Agreed. And what's the reason they're shutting it down? They're not making enough money, or they don't feel like valued. Again, same thing, like human culture or human, emotions, all in all, it's gonna boil down to the same. Whether it's an employee, whether it's a franchisee, or etc. But I agree, is how can I help you? Hey, Kendall, notice like, obviously you're not making enough money. Is there anything we could do to help you? Where do you think you're falling short? Obviously, I have 150 other units. We have other franchisees. Maybe I can pair you up with somebody else. And I think you're right. The franchisors should play a more active role of, yes, you're not making money. It's not your fault.
Right.
I want to share that fault.
Yes, because we're the brand. We have the systems. We created this model.
Exactly.
We proved this model. We said it worked. You bought into it. So now let's
Exactly.
talk about what may be going on in your location that might be out of your control, or maybe it is something you can impact. And that's where you got to have tough conversations around, is it time to relocate?
Yeah.
Right? Is it time to terminate that GM that keeps causing all these problems for you? It happens to be your brother or what, like there's a lot of that stuff that goes on, but it has to be quick, right? And actionable, and that way you're not, making it prolong itself to the inevitable.
Yeah, and I think on the franchisor side, I've never actually even thought of it that far in, but that's amazing. Like, I think the most successful franchisors should take that approach, right? And ultimately, at the end of the day, if they're making more money, again, they're not going to close the location down, and they're not going to give you hell, right? So it's like, they're happy, they're making money, you're happy, you're making money, everybody wins. So I guess the way you treat the guest of the restaurant, for the franchisors, the guest has to be the franchisee.
100%, right? So like franchisees serve guests, franchisors serve franchisees. And so the hierarchy flows down, right? So they got to be enabled, they got to be satisfied, they got to be happy. You have to, of course, focus on top line. You have to focus on the royalties you're collecting.
Yeah.
And you don't make money off of the franchisee's bottom line.
Yeah.
Okay, that is clear. And so don't get me wrong, you have to focus on the top line as well, but it's more important of the longevity of that restaurant. So yes, you don't get incentivized financially from a franchisee's bottom line, but you maintain that royalty stream, you maintain the longevity, and you are growing the value of your business by keeping more locations open for longer periods of time.
Goal of business is to stay in business. So I agree 100%, because, if they continue losing money, they're going to shut it down, and guess what happens to your royalty fees?
That's right. It all goes
Zeroes
away.
out. Yeah, that's a great point. These are not just necessarily in a restaurant space. This applies to any business.
It could be fitness, it could be hardware stores, you name it.
Yeah, it could be technology like us. I mean, again, we're dealing with these stuff. We've solved some of these problems, and some of this stuff is actually going to be things that we will have to solve in the future. And that's amazing, because, again, it's just business and entrepreneurship and learning what mistakes to make, what mistakes not to make, and then what to look for and avoid. So, and yeah, within the franchisee-franchisor world, it's a lot more difficult, because you've got 20 different groups. They're all in different stages of life. It makes it a lot more challenging to navigate. But I think, again, communicating, setting expectations, assuming they haven't read the FDD, and assuming that they don't know anything, so you just cover it, be like, hey, just for point of reference, these are the points, these are the non-negotiables, right? Here's what we're doing, and then take a proactive approach.
Right, absolutely.
Awesome. So this was, we've done 2 prior episodes on franchising, franchisor relationships, and I thought this was a very incredible and insightful episode. So stay tuned for the future ones. Kendall, thanks for being here. As always,
thank you. Yeah.
Every time I
Always
talk
a pleasure.
to you, I learn from you.
Same.
You are
Same.
on our board of advisors for a reason.
Yes.
So I always appreciate the advice, and I've learned so much from you, and will continue to learn from you.
Likewise, man. Appreciate you.
Thank you.